Uncle Bob, I think we should move your assets into this new trust structure before the tax year ends. I should have known something was wrong when Daniel said that. My nephew had never shown much interest in trust structures or tax planning before. But there I was, sitting in my study in West Vancouver, looking out at the gray December waters of Howe Sound, thinking about how proud my sister would have been of him. Let me back up. 3 months earlier, I'd sold Morrison Logistics for $42 million. $42 million. I still couldn't quite believe it myself. I'd built that company from nothing, started with a single truck running freight between Vancouver and Calgary back in 1987. By the time I sold it, we had a fleet of 200 vehicles and contracts with half the major retailers in Western Canada. My wife, Patricia, had always said I worked too hard. She was right, of course. She usually was. But she never got to see what all those long hours built into. Cancer took her 3 years ago, 2 months before our 40th anniversary. The house felt too big after that, too quiet. Just me and the memories and that damn view of the water that she loved so much. Daniel was my sister Margaret's boy. Margaret died when he was 15, diabetes complications that spiraled out of control too fast for anyone to stop. I'd tried to be there for him after that, paid for his university, helped him get his first job. But his father had remarried quickly, moved them to Toronto, and the distance grew. We'd exchange Christmas cards, the occasional email, but that was about it. Then, out of nowhere last September, Daniel called. Said he was moving back to Vancouver, wanted to reconnect. He was 32 now, working as some kind of financial consultant, had that polished look about him, expensive suits, confident handshake, always checking his phone. Nothing like my sister, who'd been warm and chaotic and couldn't balance a checkbook to save her life, but I figured people change. We started having dinner once a week. He'd come to the house, we'd order in from that Italian place Patricia used to love, and we'd talk. He seemed genuinely interested in my life, asked questions about the business sale, about my plans for retirement. I told him I was thinking about buying a place in Victoria, maybe doing some traveling, finally seeing all those places Patricia had wanted to visit. You should really think about estate planning, Uncle Bob, he'd said over lasagna one night. With that much capital, the tax implications are significant. I'd laughed. I've got a lawyer handling all that. Don't you worry about your old uncle. But he persisted, gently, brought it up every few visits. Said his firm specialized in exactly this kind of thing, high net worth individuals transitioning into retirement. Finally, I thought, why not? He was family, Margaret's son. If I couldn't trust him, who could I trust? That's how we ended up in my study that December afternoon. Daniel with his laptop open, showing me diagrams of trust structures and tax shelters. His presentation was impressive, professional, made it sound so reasonable. The key is moving everything into the trust before December 31st, he explained. That way, we capture this tax year's exemptions. And with you as the primary beneficiary and me as the trustee, we can manage the assets more efficiently. Trustee? I asked. Why wouldn't I be the trustee of my own trust? It's standard practice for these structures, he said smoothly. The trustee handles the administrative work. You'd still have full access to everything, of course. This just creates a more favorable tax treatment. Something about it didn't sit right with me, but I couldn't put my finger on what. Daniel seemed to sense my hesitation. Tell you what, he said. Why don't we have your financial advisor look over the documents? Get a second opinion. I want you to feel completely comfortable with this. That seemed reasonable. I don't actually have a financial advisor anymore, I admitted. Patricia and I used to work with Gordon Chen, but he retired last year. I can recommend someone, Daniel offered. Actually, there's a woman in my building, Margaret Thornton, very sharp, completely independent. Would you like me to set up a meeting? I agreed. He scheduled it for the following Tuesday, said it would be good to have everything reviewed before we moved forward. Looking back, I realize he was trying to control every piece of the board, choosing who I'd talk to, managing the timeline. But at the time, I just thought he was being helpful. Margaret Thornton's office was in a tower downtown, 20th floor with a view of the harbor. She was maybe 50, short gray hair, reading glasses on a chain, the kind of person who looked like she didn't suffer fools. We shook hands and she gestured to a chair. Mr. Morrison, Daniel tells me you're considering a trust restructure. Please, call me Bob. And yes, my nephew thinks it would be advantageous for tax purposes. She nodded slowly. May I see the documents? I handed her the folder Daniel had prepared. She put on her glasses and started reading. The silence stretched out. I watched a seaplane take off from the harbor, watched it bank toward the Gulf Islands. Patricia and I had always talked about taking one of those flights. Mr. Morrison, Bob, I need to ask you something. Margaret's voice was careful, measured. Has Daniel explained what would happen to these assets if something were to happen to you? Well, they'd pass to my named beneficiaries. I've got the Coastal Wildlife Foundation and a couple of other charities. Not under this structure. She tapped the document. Under this trust agreement, upon your death or incapacitation, full control passes to the trustee. That's Daniel. He would have sole discretion over distribution. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. That doesn't sound right. It's not. Not if you want to maintain control of your assets. She was quiet for a moment, then asked, Bob, do you mind if I ask you a personal question? How well do you know Daniel's current financial situation? I mean, he seems to be doing well. He's got a good job, nice apartment. I'm going to be very direct with you, because I think I need to be. She took off her glasses. Daniel didn't suggest you meet with me because I'm independent. He suggested me because 3 months ago, I turned down a job offer from his firm. I know how they operate, and I know that the kind of trust structure he's proposing isn't designed to save you taxes. It's designed to give him control of your assets. The room felt too warm suddenly. Why would he do that? I don't know his specific motivations, but I can tell you this structure is not in your best interests. And before you sign anything, I think we should do some due diligence. I should have been angry. I should have defended Daniel, my sister's boy, family. But instead, I just felt tired. And maybe, somewhere deep down, I'd known something was off. You don't build a $42 million company without developing some instincts about people. What kind of due diligence? I asked. Let me make some calls, Margaret said. Give me 24 hours. I left her office and drove home in a fog. The December rain had started. That persistent Vancouver drizzle that Patricia used to say made everything look like a watercolor painting. I sat in my study, looking at the documents Daniel had prepared, seeing them differently now. All those clauses about trustee powers, trustee discretion, trustee authority. Daniel called that evening. How'd the meeting with Margaret go? Good, I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. She's reviewing the documents. Great. So, you thinking we can sign this week? I'd really like to get everything filed before Christmas. What's the rush, Daniel? A pause. No rush. Just trying to beat the tax deadline. But we've got time if you need it. After we hung up, I poured myself a scotch, Patricia's favorite Lagavulin, and stood at the window. Across the Sound, the lights of Bowen Island were flickering on. I thought about my sister. Margaret had been 8 years younger than me, wild and funny and terrible with money. I remembered co-signing a loan for her once, back when she was 23 and wanted to start a catering business. She'd defaulted within 6 months, and I'd paid it off without a word. That's what family did, but this felt different. The next morning, Margaret Thornton called. Bob, can you come to my office? There are some things we need to discuss. When I got there, she had papers spread across her desk. I made those calls, she said. Daniel's firm is under investigation by the Securities Commission. They've been accused of defrauding elderly clients through complicated trust structures. The firm places a trustee in control, then slowly drains the assets through management fees and related party transactions. But Daniel's my nephew. That might be exactly why he targeted you. Family trust makes people let their guard down. She slid another document across the desk. I also ran a background check. I hope you don't mind, but given the circumstances, Bob, Daniel filed for bankruptcy 18 months ago. He's got outstanding judgments for over $300,000. His wages are being garnished. I stared at the papers. The photo was definitely Daniel, but the financial history was a disaster. Credit cards, personal loans, a failed real estate investment, debts to creditors I'd never heard of. There's more, Margaret said quietly. I have a friend who's a private investigator. She did some surveillance over the last 24 hours. Daniel's been meeting with someone from his firm, going over documents. Bob, I think they've been planning this since before he contacted you. She showed me photos. Daniel at a coffee shop with an older man, both hunched over a laptop. Daniel outside my house, on his phone, photographing the property. Daniel at a bank, carrying files. He's going to ask you to sign the trust documents this week, Margaret continued. Probably push for it to happen quickly, casually. Maybe over dinner, maybe at your house. Once you sign, once the assets are transferred, he'll control everything, and legally, there won't be much you can do about it. I felt something break inside me. Not anger, not yet, just a deep, bone-tired sadness. He's Margaret's son. I know. I'm sorry. I drove home through the rain. The wipers beat steady rhythm across the windscreen. Back and forth, back and forth. When I got to the house, I sat in the car for a long time, looking at the front door. Patricia had painted it red because she'd read somewhere that red doors were good luck. We'd laughed about it, how superstitious she'd become near the end. But I'd kept it red anyway. My phone rang. Daniel. Hey, Uncle Bob. I was thinking, why don't I come by tonight? Bring some Thai food. We can review those documents Margaret looked at. Maybe get everything signed and done. You know, Christmas is coming. Would be nice to have it wrapped up. Tonight? My voice sounded strange to my own ears. If you're free. I know Margaret probably had some questions. Happy to walk you through anything, she flagged. Sure, I heard myself say. Come by around 7. After we hung up, I called Margaret. He's coming tonight, pushing to sign. Don't sign anything, Bob. I've already contacted the Securities Commission with what we found, and I think you should record the conversation. With your permission, I'd like to be nearby, in case you need backup. So that's how it happened. That evening, 7 o'clock, December rain drumming on the roof, Daniel arrived with Thai takeout and his laptop and a folder of documents that would have stolen my life's work. We sat in the study. He was relaxed, confident, talking about holiday plans and asking if I'd heard from any of Patricia's relatives. The food sat between us, getting cold. So, what did Margaret think? He finally asked. She had some concerns about the trustee provisions. Oh, that's standard stuff. I can explain it. He pulled out the documents, started going through them point by point. His voice was smooth, practiced. This wasn't the first time he'd done this pitch. Daniel, I interrupted, why did you really contact me? He looked up, surprised. What do you mean? Your family. We hadn't spoken in years. Then I sell my company. And suddenly you're moving back to Vancouver, wanting to have dinner every week. Uncle Bob, I don't know what Margaret said to you, but she told me about the investigation into your firm, about your bankruptcy, about the $300,000 in debt. The transformation was instant. His face closed off, the friendly nephew mask dropping away. She had no right. Did you ever care about reconnecting? Or was it always about the money? For a long moment, he just stared at me. Then he laughed, but it wasn't a pleasant sound. You know what? Your sister always said you were too smart for your own good. I told them this wouldn't work, that you'd figure it out. But they said family trust was the key, that you'd want to believe in me. They, the firm. This is what we do, Bob. We find wealthy, lonely people, and we help them with their assets. Usually they're grateful for the attention, for having someone who cares. You were supposed to be easy. Recent widower, no kids, 42 million, and nobody to leave it to. You should have been perfect. Something in his voice, the casual cruelty of it, finally sparked my anger. Get out of my house. Not without those signatures. He stood up, moved toward the desk where the documents lay. You're going to sign these, Bob, because if you don't, I'll make your life hell. I'll contest Patricia's estate, claim undue influence. I'll sue you for every penny you borrowed from my mother over the years. The study door opened. Margaret Thornton walked in, followed by 2 men in dark suits. Daniel Morrison, one of them said, pulling out identification. Securities Commission, we need you to come with us for questioning regarding fraudulent trust schemes targeting elderly investors. Daniel's face went white. You can't. This is a private residence. We have a warrant. We've been investigating your firm for 8 months. Mr. Morrison's case is one of 6 active complaints. The officer looked at me. Sir, you may want to contact your lawyer. You'll need to give a statement. They took Daniel out through the rain to a waiting car. I watched from the window as the taillights disappeared down the street. Margaret stood beside me, quiet. I'm sorry it had to happen this way, she finally said. I should have seen it. The signs were all there. He was good at what he did. That's why they're dangerous. I turned to look at her. Why did you help me? You didn't know me. You could have just told Daniel no and walked away. She smiled sadly. My father lost his retirement savings to a scheme like this 5 years ago. Someone he trusted. Someone who seemed professional and caring. He never recovered from it. Not really. Not just the money, but the betrayal. It broke something in him. She paused. I couldn't save my father, but maybe I could help you. Over the following weeks, the story came out in pieces. Daniel had been working with his firm for 2 years, specifically targeting wealthy individuals who'd recently lost spouses. They had a whole system, databases of obituaries and probate filings, scripts for making contact, psychological profiles for building trust. Daniel's role had been to get close to me, establish a relationship, then guide me into signing over control of my assets. The firm would have installed him as trustee, then systematically drained the trust through inflated management fees, questionable investments, and outright theft. By the time anyone questioned it, the money would have been moved through enough shell companies to be untraceable. 6 other people had fallen for it. Most were in their 70s and 80s. All had recently lost loved ones. All had signed similar trust documents. The Securities Commission estimated the firm had stolen over $15 million. Daniel tried to cut a deal, offering to testify against his bosses in exchange for a lighter sentence. The Crown Attorney wasn't interested. In February, he pleaded guilty to fraud over $5,000, breach of trust, and conspiracy. The judge gave him 4 years in federal prison, called his actions a calculated exploitation of grief and family bonds. I was in court for the sentencing. I probably shouldn't have gone, but I needed to see it through. Daniel looked smaller in the prisoner's box, deflated. His lawyer read a statement on his behalf about difficult circumstances and poor choices and deep remorse. When the judge asked if he had anything to say, Daniel stood up. I'm sorry, Uncle Bob. That was it. 3 words. I wanted to feel something, anger or satisfaction or vindication, but I just felt empty. Margaret drove me home from the courthouse. It was one of those rare, clear March days in Vancouver, the mountains sharp against the sky, the kind of day Patricia would have insisted we go for a walk. Are you okay? Margaret asked as we sat in her car outside my house. I don't know, I admitted. I keep thinking about my sister, about how disappointed she'd be. But then I think, maybe this was partly my fault. I didn't stay in touch after she died. I let Daniel drift away. If I'd been more present in his life, maybe. Don't do that to yourself. You're not responsible for his choices. Being absent isn't the same as causing harm. Then why does it feel like it is? She didn't have an answer for that. That evening, I sat in my study with a glass of scotch and a box of old photographs. There was one of Margaret and me as kids, standing in front of our parents' house in Winnipeg. She was maybe 7, gap-toothed and grinning, holding a frog she'd caught in the yard. I was 15, gangly and awkward, trying to look annoyed but failing. Another photo, years later. Margaret at 25, pregnant with Daniel, glowing with that specific joy of impending motherhood. I remembered that day. She'd announced it over Sunday dinner, and our mother had cried with happiness. And one more, Daniel at 10, my arm around his shoulders, both of us at a Canucks game. Patricia had taken the photo. Daniel was wearing a Canucks jersey I'd bought him, and he was beaming. He'd seemed so happy then, so full of potential. Where had it gone wrong? When had that boy become the man who'd tried to steal from me? Maybe there wasn't a simple answer. People are complicated. Circumstances pile up. Debts become pressures, become choices, become crimes. Maybe Daniel had started down this path with small justifications, each one easier than the last, until he was so far gone he couldn't see the way back. Or maybe he'd always been capable of this, and I'd just chosen not to see it because he was family, because he was Margaret's son, because I'd wanted so badly to have someone to care about after Patricia died. The truth was probably somewhere in the middle, messy and unsatisfying like most truths are. 6 months later, Margaret Thornton called. "Bob, I wanted to let you know." Daniel's appealing his sentence, but it's not likely to go anywhere. More importantly, the Securities Commission has shut down the firm. Everyone involved is facing charges. The victims are being compensated from the firm's seized assets. "That's good," I said. "Thank you for calling." "There's something else." Daniel's lawyer contacted me. "Daniel wants to write you a letter. An actual apology, not the courtroom performance. His lawyer says it's not about reducing his sentence, it's about making amends. I told them I'd pass along the request, but that the decision was entirely yours." I thought about it for a long time. What could he possibly say that would matter? But then again, maybe that wasn't the point. Maybe it wasn't about what I needed to hear, but what he needed to say. "Tell him he can write," I finally said. "I can't promise I'll respond, but I'll read it." The letter came 3 weeks later, handwritten, 5 pages long. His handwriting was like Margaret's, loopy and irregular. I sat in the study with Patricia's scotch and read it straight through. He didn't make excuses. He talked about the bankruptcy, about the shame of it, about how the debt had made him desperate, about how his father's new family had made him feel like an outsider, how he'd resented them and resented his circumstances, and resented the world for taking his mother too soon, about how the firm had seemed like a solution, how they'd trained him to see marks instead of people, how he'd convinced himself I wouldn't miss the money anyway, that I was old and childless and wouldn't need it much longer. Then he'd seen my house, my life, the careful way I'd preserved Patricia's things, the red door, the photos on the walls, the garden she'd planted that I still maintained even though I killed everything I tried to grow, and he'd realized I was just as lonely as he was, just as adrift, and he'd done it anyway. "I don't expect forgiveness," he wrote at the end. "I don't deserve it. I betrayed family, I betrayed trust, and I betrayed the memory of my mother, who taught me better. I'm writing this because my therapist here says I need to take responsibility, not just legally but morally. So here it is, Uncle Bob. I'm sorry. I'm truly, deeply sorry. You deserved better from me. You deserved better from Margaret's son. I failed you. I failed her. I failed myself. I hope someday I can be someone she wouldn't be ashamed of. But I understand if that day never comes for you." I folded the letter carefully and put it back in its envelope. Then I got out some writing paper. Patricia had always insisted on keeping proper stationery, said emails were too impersonal, and I wrote back. "Daniel, I read your letter. Thank you for your honesty. You're right that you betrayed my trust, and that hurt deeply. You're also right that forgiveness isn't something you can demand or expect. It's something that has to be freely given, and I'm not there yet. Maybe I never will be. But I believe people can change. I have to believe that. Or, what's the point of any of this? Your mother made mistakes, but she kept trying. She kept showing up. She was never too proud to admit when she was wrong. If you're truly sorry, then prove it by being better. Not to me, I may never see you again outside a courtroom, but to yourself, to the next person who trusts you, to your mother's memory. 4 years is a long time. Use it to figure out who you want to be when you get out. Use it to become someone Margaret would have recognized as her son. I can't give you forgiveness right now, but I can give you that much hope, your Uncle Bob." I mailed it the next day and tried not to think about whether I'd done the right thing. Life moved on. I sold the house in West Vancouver, too many ghosts in those rooms. Bought a smaller place in Victoria like I'd originally planned, a little bungalow walking distance from the water. Margaret Thornton and I stayed in touch. She became my financial advisor, helped me set up a proper estate plan with legitimate protections. We had lunch every few months when I was in Vancouver, became friends of a sort, I donated a substantial amount to the Coastal Wildlife Foundation in Patricia's name, started volunteering with them, helping with their conservation programs. Turned out I liked working with my hands again, getting dirty, being useful. Some days I'd think about Daniel. Wonder how he was doing in prison, whether he was really changing or just serving his time. I'd think about Margaret too, my sister, gone 20 years now but still present somehow. I'd wonder what she'd make of all this, whether she'd have seen it coming, whether she'd have forgiven him faster than I could. But mostly, I tried to focus forward. Patricia used to say I spent too much time looking backward, dwelling on mistakes and missed opportunities. The past is done, Bob, she'd say. It's just a story now. The only thing you can change is the story you tell about it. So here's the story I tell myself now. I built something from nothing. I lost people I loved. I was almost betrayed by someone I trusted. But I was also saved by a stranger who became a friend. I learned that family isn't just blood, it's choice. And I learned that trust, once broken, can't be easily repaired. But that doesn't mean you stop believing in the possibility of trust altogether. Last month, I got another letter from Daniel. He's taken university courses in prison, working toward a degree in social work. Says he wants to help people with addiction and debt problems when he gets out. Wants to make different choices. I don't know if he means it. I don't know if it matters whether I believe him. But I wrote back anyway. Told him about the bungalow in Victoria, about the Wildlife Foundation work, about how I've been learning to grow tomatoes and failing spectacularly at it. Told him that Patricia always said the only way out is through, that you can't outrun your mistakes, only learn from them. I don't know if we'll ever have a real relationship again. Probably not. Too much has happened. Too much trust has been shattered. The word vengeance suggests a kind of active pursuit of revenge, a satisfaction in watching someone suffer for what they did to you. But I didn't feel that in court, watching Daniel get sentenced. And I don't feel it now, reading his letters from prison. Mostly what I feel is sadness. For what could have been, for the relationship we might have had if circumstances had been different. For my sister, who loved her son but died too soon to see who he'd become. For the version of Daniel that 10-year-old in the Canucks jersey might have grown into, if life had been kinder. But maybe that's its own kind of vengeance. Not the hot anger kind, but the cold, clear-eyed kind. The kind that says, I see exactly what you did. I see exactly what you cost me. Not just in money, but in trust and hope and the belief that family means something sacred. I see it all, and I'm choosing not to let it destroy me. I'm choosing to build something new from the wreckage. And that might be the most powerful response of all. The sun is setting over the Strait of Juan de Fuca now, painting the water gold and pink. Patricia would have loved this view. I pour myself a small scotch, her Lagavulin, and raise it to the window. To survival. To second chances, both given and received. To the complicated mess of family and the grace of knowing when to hold on and when to let go. To strangers who become friends. To broken trust and the courage it takes to trust again anyway. And to Margaret, wherever she is, I hope she knows I tried my best with her boy. It wasn't enough, not nearly, but I tried. The water sparkles in the dying light, and somewhere in the distance, I can hear the sound of the evening ferry heading back to Vancouver. Life goes on, the past becomes just a story, and every day, we choose what kind of story we want it to be. That's the real vengeance against betrayal, isn't it? Not destruction, but reconstruction. Not revenge, but resilience. Not being destroyed by what shattered you, but picking up the pieces and building something new. The scotch is smooth and smoky. The sunset is beautiful. I'm alive, I'm safe, and I'm free. That'll do.